Kia ora, I'm Holly Thomas and with me today is Kāti Rua.
Joining us today on Vote 2023 is Te Pāti Māori's candidate for the Te Tai Tonga electorate, Tākuta Ferris. Tākuta whakapapas te Tahu and Kāti Māmoe in the South Island. With a passion for kapahaka, he has led his rōpū tamatia arakanui to many matatini competitions. Representing Te Pāti Māori, Tākuta contested the Te Tai Tonga electorate in 2020. Today, he's here speaking with us about Te Pāti Māori's policies and hopes to challenge Labour Party's Rino Tiriti, who has held the seat since 2011.
Welcome, Tākuta. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, to let the audience know a bit about yourself and your party, we're just going to start off with a quick fire round of questions. So, can you describe Te Pāti Māori in 3 adjectives?
Unapologetic, relentless, tangata whenua.
Good ones. Can you briefly explain what the Māori electorates are for the people who may not know what they are?
Oh, yeah, kapai. So the Māori electorates are 7 geographical areas right across the country where the Māori seats are held. And so the Māori seats were established back in like 1867 or something like that. And they were to provide a clear and independent representation for Māori in Parliament. So there are 7 seats right across New Zealand. This obviously means that the seats geographically are huge, but it does give us a clear option to vote for a Māori candidate. But the thing is, you have to be on the Māori roll in order to vote for a Māori candidate. So not everybody in the country can vote for the Māori candidate, but everybody in the country can party vote for the Māori party.
Very nicely explained. And what are your top priorities if you are elected?
Yeah, well, the top priorities for us is looking after the well-being of our people. And so in the cost of living crisis, that means getting more money back into the pockets of our whānau. That's what our tax policies do. And then trying to tackle as many of the pressure points that add cost to family living as we can. So things like GST off kai, that's something that helps to ease the pressure. So every $100 that a whānau spends at the supermarket, they keep $15 of it. So those types of things, those are our top priorities. And then of course for us, climate and environmental destruction is a top priority. We can't escape climate change. It's a global phenomenon. It will affect us, and it's having an impact now, as we've seen in the last few years. But more important, equally, I suppose, as important and more pressing for us is local environmental degradation, which means that all of our local rivers, you can't swim in it. We've got polluters putting stuff straight in our river. That destroys the river system. It destroys the little creeks, all of our estuaries where, Māori like to go and gather pippies and cockles still. Hey, we still like to do that. And when your estuary is filling up with pollution, that's something that is dwindling. And also that pollution runs out to the coast and it affects the local reefs. And those are places where we have our mahinga kai. It's where we exercise a lot of our customs. It's where we maintain a lot of our customs. All of our history, our knowledge is shared doing those activities. So those are real key things for us.
Yeah, absolutely. What specifically kind of made you want to get into politics?
Yeah, I've never been a career aspiration of mine. Me, like many other Māori in our age group, are sort of pushed into these things, or put into our kaumātua or our parents' generation, say, look, we want you to go and do this. Well, then we just got to go and do it. And so that's how I end up here. But what we are, the likes of me, the Rawiri Waititis of the world, Maria Menos of the world, the Hanas of the world, we're sort of brought up in this stuff, and I've been working in it, iwi development, hapu and whānau development, in education for more than 20 years. So we're on the ground, grassroots, rebuilding our people and raising it up. And so you end up in leadership roles. And so when it gets to this sort of time, and there is there's a need for an intergenerational change in and around Māori leadership. You see our current leaders, you would have saw last night, Willie Jackson, Koro Shane Jones, they all sort of happy, with little movements forward. They're like, oh no, it's okay, it's good. We got $1 billion for us, 3 years in a row. And well, fellas, people from my generation were like, yeah, but it was 1 billion out of 140 billion. We're not impressed with that number. They are, but we aren't. And so we have a bit of a different expectation, We have a different understanding. We have a different approach. And so there comes a time when leadership has to change. And in order to move our people further up, further on, advance it forward, it needs change leadership.
Perfect. Now, just a bit of a controversial question for all our Māori viewers out there. What do you prefer, hangi or boil up?
Oh, you can't beat a hangi with a watercress boil up on it.
Oh, that's a bit of a cop-out question. Come on, one or the other.
Hangi.
Classic, that one. Just another question that's maybe not as hard. Do you think Aotearoa should become a republic?
I think independence for the country is a good place to move, but how we get there is the key thing. A lot of people want to become a republic because they think they're going to win the freedom and be able to just run themselves. But if you become a republic, then you do away with the constitutional foundation that sets this country up. And so what replaces that is the thing that's key in that conversation, right? So that's where I stand on that one.
Now, we recently had National's James Christmas on, and he defined co-governance as the Crown and local government working alongside iwi to manage environmental features in a way that recognises the Treaty of Waitangi. How would you define co-governance, and do you think it extends past management of environmental resources?
Yes, 100%. Co-governance, the thing that the government of the country struggles with is how to recognise Te Tiriti or Waitangi. That's the thing it struggles with. And so the part of the problem in this conversation is the majority of the population are fairly in the dark when it comes to what does Te Tiriti or Waitangi mean, what is it, and also what's the relationship between Māori and the government. So Te Tiriti or Waitangi is the constitutional relationship document between Māori and the Crown. It actually doesn't involve Parliament. Parliament is the executive of the Crown, tasked with administrating its affairs in the country, right? So that means that Te Tiriti or Waitangi is not a function of the democracy. It's the thing that underpins the democracy, So when it comes to co-governance, and the co-governance firestorm that's been whipped up over the last 6 months is really a symptom of ignorance. It's an outcome of ignorance, and ignorance, privilege, all of those types of things. And unfortunately in Aotearoa, there's a massive block of people, there's 1 million odd baby boomers who were brought up ignorant of all of these facts and understandings. And into their old age, they really haven't wanted to find any of it out and do anything meaningful with it. So it creates a bit of a problem when you're trying to move this forward. But co-governance is just the government's current attempt to embody what Te Tiriti or Waitangi means to the country. It's their current attempt. Before co-governance, there was co-management. And before co-management, there was full and complete consultation. So it's been a bit of a moving dial on what the governments of the day think best embodies the treaty relationship. And so, as I just said, the treaty isn't a cog in democracy. It's the foundation. It's the constitutional foundation that underpins the democracy. So the government's still got a lot of work to do to articulate that. And if they can get it clear, if they can articulate it, write it down, put it out, let everybody know exactly what the relationship with the treaty and the Crown and the government is, and Māori, then that will make things a lot clearer and it'll lead to a lot less tension.
Perfect. And within Te Tiriti or Waitangi, it does mention the protection of Māori Tonga, and that includes the land and the sea, and we know that you're really closely fixated with the land and the sea. What do you think about Labour's very recent plans for 6 new marine reserves between Oamaru and the Catlins?
Marine reserves are a good idea, but one of the features of a marine reserve is that in Aotearoa is that they tend to produce a thing called a kina barren. Okay, and so when you have a reserve and you leave it there and you don't do nothing else with it, because of the nature of the inshore species in Aotearoa, so all of the predators of kinas, they've been wiped out by fishing. Crayfish, wiped out. Snapper, wiped out. So they're no longer effective controllers of a kina population in New Zealand. I've dived many places around the country. I see them all the time. And so here's the stupid thing, right? So we set up these reserves and then we let the kinas proliferate. They take over. And what they end up doing is mowing down all of the seaweed, all of the kelp, and then nothing lives. Okay? And like iwi all around the country, they say to Doc, we want to go in and take those kinas out. And Doc says, oh, well, you're not allowed to. So whilst I agree with marine reserves, ideas like rahui are better because it moves the reserve from there to there and move it over there and then move it back here, So you're not just causing a problem in one place. So I agree with that. And yes, we are fierce defenders. I, in particular, am a fierce defender of the moana because it's just a place where Māori continue and have always continued to exercise our rights in terms of customary gathering, eating the kai that our ancestors ate, and all those types of things. And if I just take us back to Tiriti or Waitangi, yes, Article number 2. Article number 2 is really easy to understand. Okay, all pre-existing rights of Māori are acknowledged and guaranteed to continue in Article 2. That's basically what it's saying. And those rights are now clearly understood through the workings of the tribunal to be tangible and intangible rights. Okay, rights, properties, taongas. So it's land and fisheries and lakes, but it's also taonga, it's also customs, and it's also language. Okay, so yeah, you need to get good, clear understanding out there. Actually, while we're on the treaty, we might as well do the whole 3. So Article number 1, Kāwanatanga, right? Kāwanatanga is Māori gave the Queen, okay, and the incoming settlers the right and privilege to govern themselves, to self-govern. Okay, and in a sovereign country, that's no little thing. That's a huge koha from Te Ao Māori to Te Ao Pākehā, the right to self-govern in a foreign country. Okay, so Article number 2, all the pre-existing rights of Māori are acknowledged and guaranteed to continue. Also in Article 2 is the right to preemption. So Māori gave the Crown and the Crown's people the right to own land in a foreign country. That's also not a small gift. That's a huge gift. You can't just go into different countries today and expect that you could buy land. Okay, that's not a thing. There are very special conditions around it. And then Article number 3, even though our mate Seymour keeps saying it's all about rights and duties, rights and duties. Sorry, Seymour, those aren't the words in the treaty. The words in the treaty are rights and privileges. Okay, rights and privileges. So in Article 3, the Queen is extending the rights and privileges of her British people in England. Those rights were gifted to Māori. Okay, and those rights didn't extinguish the rights that are in Article 2. They were in addition to the rights that were in Article 2. And not enough people understand these things through the country. And so when they're brought up and they're used in terms that sort of create an advantaging of Māori and a disadvantaging of Pākehā, that's a complete misuse of the treaty. And that's what we're having to deal with now. And what's not commonly understood about the treaty either is the 4th article, which is the right to religious freedom. Okay, the right to religious freedom. So all people in Aotearoa, via Te Tiriti or Waitangi, have the right to religious freedom. So that's those are some significant sort of gifts and exchanges in the treaty that not enough people know enough about.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that Te Tai Tonga electorate faces, and how would you address this if elected?
I think, if we're talking specifically about our people, Māori people in Te Tai Tonga, the people who vote for the Māori candidate and the Māori Member of Parliament in Te Tai Tonga, it is 100% the cost of living and the cost of a house. Okay? The cost of living and the cost of a house. Or we could say the cost of a house and the cost of living. You know, they're almost one and the same, but they are a little bit nuanced. You know, a house is the key to leading our people out of poverty. You know, our people have always been captured in poverty and low incomes. And now that there's a cost of living crisis and the middle are getting squeezed, our people have been thrust down. You know, there's 100,000 homeless people in Aotearoa and 60,000 of them are Māori. So our people are no longer just in lower incomes and poverty, they're in poverty and in homelessness. So that is without a doubt the biggest concern, and it needs really concerted effort to tackle. And I'm real clear and fervently positioned in the idea that if we keep trying to work with the governments, you know, and wait for the governments to solve this for us, my kids' will be poor. You know, they'll have no house. So what this needs is it needs real determined action from us ourselves. So all of our iwi leadership, our marae and hapu leadership, all of our Māori community body leadership, government initiatives like Te Pūtahitanga o Te Waipounamu, they all need to pull together and start to do things in a very determined fashion that lead directly to Māori establishing hapakainga, Māori building infrastructure, Māori building our own homes, Māori financing our own homes, and breaking our people out of the shackles of poverty. And in this day and age, those shackles are being trapped in a mortgage, having no access to land, you know, having to deal with councils. Dealing with councils adds so much cost to building in this country, and also access to land. Okay, so Māori land all around the country is still trapped in the Māori Land Court. And whilst it's called the Māori Land Court, it is not the Māori Land Court. Okay, it's the court that keeps Māori land trapped, and we can almost barely use the Māori land that's available. So our party's policy around building 2,000 homes on ancestral land is targeted at breaking the potential of Māori land out of the shackles of the Māori Land Court, which is really the Pākehā Land Court. Our ancestors called it.
Do you think that the Māori Land Court needs revision, perhaps, or maybe a different perspective?
100%. When the Māori Land Court was established, it was the Native Land Court, and our people called it the Land Stealing Land Court. Okay? And now from that time till now, it's had all little tinkering with it, little amendments, but it still keeps our land trapped, prevents Māori from using it, prevents Māori from building on it. Most of it we can't access because it's landlocked, and we have a massive asset there and we're just not allowed to use it. So those are things that we'll champion as Te Pāti Māori. And because if we had access to our land and we could do what we liked on it, we would not be in the situation that we are currently.
Another problem that you might think is a problem going into this election is the Māori electorate seats. Now, in New Zealand's constitution, unlike the general electorate seats, they aren't codified and entrenched, which means it would just need a simple majority from Parliament to be taken out. What is your opinion on this, and do you think they should be entrenched?
Oh, they should 100% be entrenched, and they should be based on how many Māori are eligible to vote, not how many Māori are on the Māori roll. You see, this is a cunning trick by the government, right? Cunning trick by the government. So they say, okay, you can have Māori seats and you have a Māori roll, but we'll only determine how many seats you get by how many Māori are on the Māori roll. You know, that's disingenuous straight away. You know, there are Māori that vote right across the country. Some are on the general roll, some are on the Māori roll. Many try to get on the Māori roll and are for some magic reason just taken off, defaulted back to the general roll. You know, so all of this sort of stuff is really disingenuous by any government. These seats should 100% be protected. They should be protected by Te Tiriti or Waitangi. You know, if the government wants to talk about co-governance and what are good models for exemplifying good treaty partnership, well, make sure that your Māori treaty partner has a equal representative voice to the Crown treaty partner. You know, that's a pretty simple approach, isn't it? instead, they leave it divided by having 2 roles and only defining the electorates by the Māori role, and then they leave them hanging around in limbo, saying, oh, well, one group might get rid of them and, someone else might bring them back. So it's really not good enough, and we should expect more.
And moving on to policy questions and law and order, Te Pāti Māori want to abolish the type and style of prisons we currently have by 2040 and replace them with community-led and community-based solutions. How will this policy work in practice?
Well, you got to slowly move out of it, right? You got to slowly move out. But here's the thing: when it comes to justice, if possession of cannabis was decriminalised and conviction records were expunged, thousands of Māori would come out of prisons. A lot of young Māori end up in prisons for traffic offences and not showing up to court, and then not showing up to court again. Then you end up in jail for a short stint. And then the next time you get in trouble, you're back to jail again. So the justice system actually has a lot to answer for. Moana Jackson conducted 3 investigations, reviews of the justice system throughout his time. And then I was lucky enough to have this conversation with Matua Moana, and this is what he told me. In 1986, Māori women prison population was 6%. And then in 2018 or 2019, the Māori women's prison population was 64%. And then this is what he said to me: Tākuta, somewhere between 1980 and 2010 or so, our women didn't just wake up and say, oh, you know what, we're just going to start being terrible. We're just going to start being criminals. No, a justice system that is overtly, systemically racist against Māori started putting Māori women in prison for low-level offending, for crimes of poverty, for acts of just trying to keep their whānau alive and looked after, started to imprison them on that basis. And his last review of the justice system was damning. 30 years on, the third of 3, and here we are, we're still trying to grapple to explain or get some traction on radically changing the justice system.
I guess just back honing in on what your solution, what the party solution would be, because on the website it says to abolish prisons, but what would be the replacement for that?
Yeah, well, whānau-led solutions. Whānau-led solutions are the replacement for most of the things that we're talking about. And the reason it's whānau-led solutions is because the state-led solutions have failed us generation after generation after generation. So if you take an idea like whānau ora, okay, and in Te Tai Tonga, whānau ora is administrated or dispensed through te pūtahitanga o te Waitangi, and they go into community and they get the funding into community, and it drives community-led action. So Māori families taking aim and taking responsibility, having a go at a whole raft of different initiatives, from health to social development to business, and they're all led by whānau on the ground. And the results and the examples, the exemplars that Te Pūtahitanga o Te Waitangi have created, particularly in the last 3 years, are outstanding. They deal to the issues based on need. They get the resource, the money, to the people who can deliver into the communities, and these communities are hard to reach for the government. The government has consistently, year after year after year, generation after generation, not being able to reach our Māori communities, but the people on the ground can. And so those examples are there. So it's about in community solutions, led by whānau, led by hapu. That's what we're talking about.
Just as succinctly as possible, what would it look like for Te Pāti Māori to establish an independent Māori Justice Authority?
Sorry, what would it look like?
Yeah, what would the process be, and what would that look like in terms of reconfiguring our current justice system to establish the independent Māori Justice Authority?
Oh yeah, well, we wouldn't bother with trying to reconfigure the existing one. Okay, there are enough senior Māori judicial and justice figures across this country. You could take Sir Tai Hakure, the first High Court judge Māori, all the way down to the new Māori judges who are coming up through in the court system now. We completely have the capacity. The biggest challenge is to carve out the resources, carve out the money, and get it set to an independent body. Now, we've seen that happen with Te Whakapapas. We've seen that happen with Te Whakapapas, and unfortunately, with Te Whakapapas, the government's taken the position that, we can trigger a review at about 10 months in, probably actually 9 months in. Let's trigger a review into how well you've gone and then criticize the efforts of Te Whakapapas over a very short period of time. So essentially, the process is the same. And in Te Whakapapas, we knew already that we have the expertise. There are so many people across Te Ao Māori now who are equipped. They are qualified, they're experienced, they know what the problems are, they know what the issues are. Same exists in justice. The main task is carving out the money and getting it allocated to an independent space. No problem for us to dream up the solutions. There are many solutions there already. There are many Māori-led rehabilitation programs. There's the youth court on Marae. All of those types of things are all options there,
And moving on to a coalition forming, Christopher Luxon has ruled out working with Te Pāti Māori, citing Te Pāti Māori as too ideologically separate from national. If his mind changed, would Te Pāti Māori consider entering into a coalition with national?
Well, I think, look, at this point, the narrative that Chris Luxon has driven and the nature of his coalition partners, there's no potential there. There's no possibility there. We would never work with a crowd like ACT who openly criticise, who openly just dismiss Te Tiriti or Waitangi, want a referendum on it, want to get rid of Te Whakapapas and think that, solutions should be based on need when Te Whakapapas is a solution based on need. There's just no space there. We couldn't do that. So, but really, at the end of the day, if Te Pāti Māori is in a position to work with a coalition government, then we would expect that coalition government to be making its way towards us, not us making our way towards them.
What would you say to critics who say that your tax policies are too radical in terms of the impacts on our economy?
I would say that's a load of rubbish. That's what the people who want to maintain the current tax system, the politicians, they're the politicians who get $8 million from individuals. They're the politicians who got $4 million from individuals. And if they put forward a wealth tax, a company's tax, a foreign company's tax, a corporate tax, if they put those things forward, those people, those companies that give them that money, they wouldn't give them the money. So of course they're not going to put it forward. Not only that, there's a lot of people in Aotearoa who have benefited well from the past. They've benefited from Rogernomics in the 80s, the privatization of state assets. They've benefited from stolen Māori land and laws that prevent Māori from developing their land, right through the 1900s, mid-1900s, right up into the 80s and 90s. And they've really worked the capitalist model into its sort of peak condition. Okay, so we're at the top of it. You have a small group of people who have amassed massive wealth and they are not willing to move on it. And so as long as you let that continue and you don't challenge it, that will just get worse and worse and worse. So, they can say that about our tax policies, but the reality is there's no other place to get more tax income. So going forward for National and Labour who won't put these policies in, they are just dealing with the same amount of money. And what are you going to get out of the same amount of money? Nothing. You need to find new money. And the new money, as I've just described, it's at the top of that really maxed out capitalist model. It sits there. And hey, back in the beginning of this year, there were a group of extremely wealthy people who penned an open letter to the government saying they'd be happy to pay some more tax. So don't believe everything that the government puts out and you hear on the media and all that. There are a lot of wealthy people who would be happy to do that.
Now, one demographic who is no stranger to challenging such constitutional, I guess, problems and challenges are students. So last question, as succinctly as possible, can you tell us why students should vote for Te Pāti Māori?
Yeah, absolutely. Inequity in this country is a historic issue. It has become so entrenched as the norm that the leadership of today, they will never challenge it. They would never challenge it. So it's up to young people. It's up to young people to think, what's the future that you want to live in? You know, what's the future that best benefits all the people in Aotearoa? You know, and it wasn't that long ago, me and my wife were still students, you know, and it wasn't that easy then, but it's definitely a lot harder now. And so, you know, as you consider what the country looks like today and how you would like it to look, here's one thing that I can guarantee. Te Pāti Māori will fight tooth and nail for the environment. You know, our environment here in Aotearoa. We'll fight tooth and nail for more equity across the whole of society, and equal distribution of the resources available. And that picture is a picture where whānaus live healthy lives. You know, healthy, got time for your family, you can do the things that mean a lot to a family, not be stuck in the grind, not be working your tail off forever, never seeing your whānau. So, you know, if that's the thing that you want to see in the future and see this country moving more towards that rather than the capitalist model, then Te Pāti Māori is your party.
Great, thank you. We've actually run out of time, but it's been great to have this conversation with you. You've been really interesting. Thank you to our dedicated production team and our viewers, and thank you to Tākuta for joining us. Early voting is now open and will be open until Saturday the 14th of October. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you soon.